Welcome to Psychic News Report. I'm Annabelle. I'm joined by my colleague, Thor Sandalwood. Hi, Thor. How are you today?
I'm doing great. We're talking about some really serious subject today.
Pretty serious. So, in the wake of number 45 getting convicted of all charges, it looks like 46 has given the green light for Ukrainian forces to use American weapons against Russia. I think that this is going to be quite a spectacle. It really does send a very loud message to Putin, and I don't think that it's going to be received very well. One of the things that I do know about Vladimir Putin is he wrote in one of his recollections of his life about encountering a rat that was cornered in their apartment when he was a young boy, and he marveled at the rat's tenacity and what that rat was willing to do to get out of that corner. So I think that speaks volumes about how he conducts himself professionally at this point as a world leader and also as one of the leaders of the KGB historically. I'm very curious to see what the thinking of Biden, Putin, and Zelensky are right now. Thor, do we have a chart at the ready for Biden?
Yes, we do have a chart for President Biden. I wanted to add to the introduction where we're explaining a little bit. Now, apparently, since February 2022, when the Russian invasion of Ukraine had started, there was a policy of when the Americans would give them these long range missiles that they would not strike targets within Russia. So basically, what's happened is President Biden and also there's other leaders of the European Union have given the green light that it's okay to retaliate and send these missile strikes within Russian territory. And we're talking about, greater targets within Russia. I mean, could it potentially be Moscow? Could it be, so that's what we're talking about, because before it was pretty much limited to targets within inside Ukraine. So this is a dramatic change of the war. I'm going to be taking a look at President Biden's chart because a lot of people are probably wondering, well, what brought about this decision? I know that there was the recent there's been an offensive, I believe, with Russia's been gaining some ground around Kharkiv, and so that's been a really big concern. So let me go ahead and put up the chart. Let's see what's going on from Biden's point of view. And here's Biden's chart. And let me look for the paint program. Here we go. So President Biden, one of the things I do want to point out, he's in a Saturn period right now. And remember, there's 9 planetary periods you can potentially be in. When I feel like I'm mentioning Saturn quite a bit lately. He's in a Saturn period right now. So he's in Saturn timeline, and that's he's in a very acute period from September 2022 to all the way, see, September 2022 to September of 2025. That's what we're going to focus on because we're more focused on what's going on with this decision. And right away, we know Saturn is an extremely difficult planet. We know that it's heavy karma. We know that it's a heavy burden of responsibility. A lot of times, not enough resources, not enough time, not really enough. Like there might, for example, when you're in a Saturn period, you could feel like there's not enough resources, not enough. Like they keep passing these bills where they're sending more money to Ukraine. Well, again, they could feel like there's not enough to bring to this fight that's happening. The other thing I want to point out, since he's in a Saturn period, and we do have to look at where Saturn is and what it rules in the chart, uh, transiting Saturn is the most powerful transiting planet in Joe Biden's chart right now. So transiting Saturn is right here. Whenever you're running a planetary timeline of a planet, the transiting planet it represents is the most powerful within the chart. So transiting Saturn's in the 4th house, and the 4th house represents things like homeland. There's definitely a focus on domestic concerns right now. Even though we're focused on an international foreign policy, there still is a focus on homeland. And there's also a focus on security. Okay. Now, one of the things that's causing this feeling of maybe insecurity is you'll notice that Saturn is going over K2 in Joe Biden's chart. K2 is the dissolving influence when we look at an astrology chart. So let me remove the chart for a second. What K2 does is K2 is destabilizing planet Saturn. So if Saturn's trying to bring about a feeling of security, whether that feeling of security is in within the homeland, like domestic or international security, um, K2 is bringing that destabilizing effect to it. So the reason why, if we were looking at the maybe psychological or emotional reason why Joe Biden would green light this, and by the way, I know there's a lot more people involved in that decision, but there was an old saying one of the presidents had on their desk. I don't know if it was Harry Truman. It said the buck stops here. So I mean, we still have to say the buck stops with the president, regardless. The buck stops there. But there is a feeling of we're losing control. There's an absolute feeling when K2 is with Saturn. We're losing control. The establishment, the narrative, we're losing control. There's a feeling there that when they started, there was about a year or two ago, they were talking about this big Ukrainian offensive, this counteroffensive that was really supposed to gain some steam. Well, apparently it didn't. Now the Russians are gaining ground in Kharkiv. This is like one of those situations where he may be saying, this is not supposed to happen. So we're going to have to make some really big moves there. So it's done out of a position. What I want you to know, with K2 and Saturn involved, there's a position of fear and insecurity what's making that decision. It's not necessarily a feeling of confidence. It's kind of like you're in a corner and you need to make a counter move to try to reestablish a frame of control. Annabelle, I think I did establish a little bit of the narrative from Biden's point of view. Now maybe the cards can give us a little bit more clarification.
Sure, sure. And while Thor did specify that there are more powers that are involved in making a decision like this, I do agree that the buck stops here. Thor, I did have one question. In
Yes.
terms of resources, when we're talking about Saturn, in terms of resources, can that also be considered support for what the president is doing or deciding to do?
If I was going to say support, it would be support from Saturn represents like the establishment. So whatever the political establishment or the financial, the Saturn represents things like corporations, banking, government. So there's a general consensus within that. But
Okay.
K2 is bringing a sense of, because it's going over natal K2 in Joe Biden's chart, there's a sense of we're losing cohesion here. So
Yeah.
we got to make a counter move here to change the situation.
I'm going to agree with that and bring up the card view. So we have the magician, and this is really where was the final decision in Joe Biden's head, what was going on there, and what is going to be the outcome of this. So, or the outgrowth of this, I should say, not necessarily the outcome, but the outgrowth. The magician, there is still a certain amount of haughtiness that comes out of Joe Biden. He still thinks that we are the superpower of the 50s and the 60s. He is a time traveler. Now, I've always said that the Biden administration was supposed to be Camelot 2.0 and failed miserably at that.
I was gonna say, if I'm right on this, isn't Joe Biden the first Catholic president since John F. Kennedy? Is that why there's kind of
That's
this
correct.
Camelot
I think they're the
2.0
only
thing?
two.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
So there was this feeling of perhaps we're going to get that back. We're going to get back this good feeling, this wholesomeness. The Kennedy era, even though there were some unwholesome things going on in that pool room, there really was a wholesomeness to the state of the country, and it was thriving and good. There's a sense of haughtiness that we are still this superpower. I think, and I'm not being un-American here, but some of that superpower has been diluted just by the course of other countries rising. So, it just really, we can't be so so arrogant. We can't say this American exceptionalism is absolute and infinite. So there is this thinking that, well, we are always going to be better than them. His thinking is very Cold War thinking, and
Mhm.
he is flexing in this moment. He doesn't have the goods to back this up.
I
He
think that he's been a politician for the last, what, 40 years, or a really long time. So he's used to that old Cold War thinking
Yes.
of this permanent strategic dominance.
Right. And I think the further we get into his senior years, let's being nice, I think the more so he is hearkening back to that Cold War kind of thinking. The sad truth is that we don't have the goods to back this up. He doesn't have the chutzpah to back it up, and he's not going to be able to. Putting him in a room, I know he's reluctant to debate with Trump, or he was the last time around. But putting him in a room with Vladimir Putin, he's going to be eating him for lunch. He's not going to be able to withstand the pressure of someone like Putin. So he does think that this is a flex that should turn out to be a negotiation. So if they fire those weapons, he thinks that Russia is going to collapse and come crawling back and beg for forgiveness and beg for some kind of peace
Maybe a
talks or
peace
something
deal.
like that.
Okay.
It's not going to happen. They are going to open up and come for Ukraine,
So
everyone.
you think they're trying to up the ante to bring them to the negotiating table, but you're thinking this is going
Yes.
to backfire according to the spread so far.
Yes. I think he's sending out, that old movie from the 80s, My Bodyguard. He's sending out the bodyguard, and he's saying, this is what we gave away. So just be warned, we've got other stuff in the back room that we're ready to use against you. Was this a great idea? The Knight of Wands, he's posturing. My Knight of Wands is in reverse. It is absolutely posturing. And then the underlying energy is the Six of Pentacles in reverse. He's not looking to negotiate. He's looking for a white flag from Vladimir Putin, and he's not going to get that. So I think it's very important that we take a look at Putin next. What do you think?
Yeah, let me pull up the chart for President Putin here. Let me take a look. Let's take a look at that. Now, one of the things that I want to point out first within President Putin's chart, which I found interesting but kind of scary at the same time, is he's got Moon in the 8th house of Taurus. Moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. It actually can show somebody who has a very grounded personality. It's somebody that knows how to maintain a very straight poker face, even when things don't look good. You're going to see just a straight poker face. He's not going to show his hand. Get what I'm saying? So it's in the 8th house, and let me really spell this out to you. This shows somebody who, first of all, they are very comfortable with clandestine, secretive intelligence operations. He comes from that, I believe, like the KGB or the FSB, one of those
KGB.
services.
He was in the KGB.
So he comes from the intelligence agencies. He's a man of many secrets, I will tell you that. But the 8th house also shows he's very comfortable being in conflict. He could be in a total a total hurricane and be having that poker face and have a manner of reserve. So even though, I know the media has been portraying him of, he's under a lot of stress right now, he's under all this pressure. When I look at the chart, he's actually okay with being under a tremendous amount of pressure. Now, the thing I want to talk about, okay, what is this going to represent now? He's okay with all of this instability, if you want to call it, this international instability. What is the result? One of the things I want to point out is transiting Rahu and transiting Ketu. They're in the 612 axis of his chart. We recently had April 8th, we had the eclipse in the 6th house of Putin's chart. And then on May 26th, we also had Mars trigger the eclipse degree, which I've been talking a lot about. But I want to talk about it's really influencing the 6th house of President Putin's chart. The sixth house has to do with warfare and conflict. Warfare, conflict. This is somebody, if I see this configuration, this is not someone I feel like is going to the peace table. I feel like there's more of this energy of we're going to double down on what's going on. So Rahu is more geared towards the sixth house of conflict. Like, let's get it on. And whatever's going on, I feel like there's a tendency for more escalation. Okay, especially with Mars triggering the eclipse degree in the sixth house, it's more towards escalation. So whatever response there is, I tend to think it's actually going to be more of an escalation type of response. So President Biden may be thinking that he's bringing him to the peace table, or maybe doing something to try to rein in the situation, where I'm feeling like this is just more of a trigger in Putin's chart.
So I agree, and I'm going to speak a little Russian here. There's a lot more "davai" than "pomagai" in President Putin. "Davai" is "let's go," and "pomagai" is "help me." There's a lot more "let's go" in him. So, and I do want to share another, vignette, little story about Vladimir Putin. He was the head of the embassy in East Germany, and there was an incident, and this is widely discussed about him. There was an incident where there was rioting outside, and there was a crowd of about 3,000 people. This before the wall came down in Berlin, and they were destroying some paperwork inside, and the boiler was cracking. It was a very dramatic moment, and he had very few men there, and they had already evacuated everyone. It was just a skeleton crew. And according to legend, Putin went out on the front steps, and only with a revolver, he quelled a crowd of 3,000 people just by speaking to them. So he is a tremendous person. He is not a negotiator, but I do think that he leads with strength, and he isn't shy about showing his strength. So bringing up the card view, I think we see a lot of his KGB coming out here. The stand down here with the Emperor in reverse is not so much a sign of weakness, but if you're ever in a bar and two gentlemen get in a fight, say we're in a Wild West poker game, and one guy stands up and he's offended, and the other guy sits back and says, "Come at me, bro." This is a "come at me, bro" kind of attitude. Try me. Let's see what happens. Um, I think he will assert that any assault on Russian lands with foreign weapons will be taken as as it is. I think he's going to do that. I think he is going to feel a certain way about it. I know I say that a lot. I think he's going to feel a certain way about it, but he's going to let them know. This is not buying time, but he's almost allowing the West to rethink this plan. You can try it. You can, come at me, bro, but I'm going to give you a minute to think about it before I stand up and show you all 6'7" of me.
And I know he came out with the statement this last week. There was a press conference or something where he came out with a statement of saying that this is not a good idea. I'm paraphrasing here, but he was saying they better think about their own security. And he was bringing up small countries in Europe. And so there was kind of a veiled threat there. So he was kind of sending this warning, if I remember correctly.
I didn't hear that report, but I think we're going to get it a little bit more finely pointed at the US. I think we're going to hear a little bit more of that. I will be paying attention to what he's saying, quite frankly.
Now, Annabelle, I was going to ask you kind of a question. Do
Sure.
you think, and maybe this is beyond the scope of the video, but do you think that within this next week, Ukraine will now take these steps since they got the green light? Do we see that happening?
So let's hold off on that.
Okay.
just yet. And maybe but before we go into Zelensky's chart and into his spread, we'll take a look at that. So
Okay.
hold that question. The unfortunate thing is that I was a Russian history minor, so I know far too much about Russia and their political systems and how things work over
And
there
maybe their mindset a little bit. Maybe
and
you
their mindset a
understand.
little bit. Well, my dad is Russian, so we've got that going for us too. So there is a certain amount of anxiety. A lot of tarot readers are going to see this and they're going to go, "Oh, okay, there's that 9 of Swords, and he's feeling very anxious and uptight about it." He's not feeling anxious and uptight about their capability. He's feeling anxious and uptight about where his hand is being forced. And he is trying to come up with a response that will be heavy enough to deter any continued activity, but not utterly destructive. So, there really
That's
is
a hard position to be in.
the
Yeah.
anxiety that he is feeling is how hard to step on the gas, quite frankly. He has had enough of the interference and the nonsense that has been going on in this particular territory. And say what you will, if it's an invasion, a reclamation of Russian lands, there's a lot of opinions about that particular area of Ukraine. Also, if you refer to it as the Ukraine, you're typically Russian leaning because it was considered the Ukraine part of Russia. If you say Ukraine, you do recognize it as an independent country.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I specify that with a lot of people because a lot of people will refer to it, oh, the war in the Ukraine, and really that does kind of lean into being more Russian favoritism. So he's really tired of the nonsense here. This should have been quick and dirty. It should have been a very simple process. Go in, almost like a surgical process, take things, get done with it. Here's the rub. 6 of Wands. This is someone who does not lose. If you were to play poker with Vladimir Putin, he would walk away with the chips. If you were to be vying for the affections of a beautiful female gymnast, perhaps, he would win. He would walk away with the girl. If you were to arm wrestle him, he is going to win. Um, he's,
Well,
really
I
like
just
the Dos
remember
Equis
the
guy,
videos of him walking tigers and
walking
I don't
tigers, riding on
yeah,
bears,
I'm just taking my tiger out for a walk.
So,
Uh,
I do think that he is an extremely formidable force. I do find him a fascinating character of history. And I am sometimes accused of being a Putin fan. I find him extraordinarily fascinating. I think that his career is fascinating. I think his behaviors are fascinating. Greg and I, my husband and I, always talk about people that we would like to have lunch with. He is someone who is on my famous person lunch list. I would love to sit down and have lunch with him and just find out what makes him tick and what he does. Um, this, I think he is sitting back in his chair. I don't think he's sweating. I think the only thing he is sweating about is how much he is going to respond to this particular action. And that's if those bombs do head toward him. So I think that this is a little bit scary. Before we go to Zelensky, why don't we take a quick look and see? Your question was, are they going to fire those off? So
well, yeah,
I'm just gonna.
because just because you have the green light doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to act on it right away. So that's the thing that that I wanted to bring up because will Zelensky be more in a state of fear? Maybe he has the green light, but will he actually initiate take these actions that he's being told to do, or maybe he wants to do?
So intuitively, I got right away that this is the green light is a little bit scary for Zelensky, because he feels that he needs more people on the ground with him. He needs more people walking in lockstep with him. So not so much here are some weapons and you're going to fire them off and have the agency over that. He kind of wants somebody there pushing the button with him. He wants all fingers on the button. If we ever had a begging for NATO to kind of come in and be his best friend, it's kind of here. There really is a reluctance to be the David and Goliath that this conflict has been billed as. I just don't think he is more apt to go back to the negotiating table, because Putin got scared that there were American weapons pointed in his way. He was like, oh, good, we're going to get to negotiate. They're finally going to back down because, our big bully, our bodyguard showed up. But that's not really what's happening. So I don't think that he's going to be, ready to pull that trigger and say, okay, let's go. I just don't see that. I think he is going to be much more cautious about his move forward. I think he's going to be asking for more support, which, that's not a shocker. He's been doing it for the last few years, but I think he's going to be asking for more support in the sense of leadership and decision making. So if things do come down to it, they're going to be able to, he'll be able to say, well, everybody else was helping me. This country was helping me. This country was helping me. And we're all in this together, bro. It's like that scene in Friday when Smokey ripped off Big Perm and he says to Craig, we got to stick together, bro. It's a little bit like that. So I think, we'll see what Zelensky does. All he needs is one big brother to kind of say, yeah, let's go, man. And hopefully that's not going to be Joe Biden.
Well, let's take a look at Zelensky's chart. What I can look at is we can look at maybe some of the motivations, maybe kind of what's influencing astrologically. Let me pull up Zelensky's chart. I don't think I've looked at Zelensky's chart on my channel, so this is going to be the first time we looked at his astrology chart. Now, one of the things I do want to bring up in his astrology chart is which I find kind of interesting right now, is the eclipse axis in Zelensky's chart is on the 10-4 axis, which has to do with homeland, fourth house there, and then has to do with leadership. But what's I'm kind of a little bit curious about is he has K2 in the 10th house, which can represent a loss of leadership. So I'm actually wondering with this eclipse and with Mars hitting the eclipse degree on May 26th, if there's actually kind of and this could be like a power is slipping. Now, this might not be shown in the media. This might not be shown what's going on, but from his point of view, maybe he's feeling less powerful than he was back in February of 2022 when this started. I do want to point out he does have an upcoming period of K2. That's going to be in October of 2025, but the effects may be experienced before then. October 2025, he's actually going to be in a K2 period. This can represent a loss of leadership. It could actually potentially represent being removed from power, resigning, surrendering, letting go. So I feel like, and we got transiting Rahu over the 10th house right now. So this is a struggle to stay in power, but also a struggle to, the fourth house is being influenced as well. So it's also a struggle to protect the homeland. But I do feel like with this K2 in the 10th house and then the eclipse really activating the situation, I do feel like there's a part of it, like there's a struggle to stay in power. Like if he doesn't handle this situation correctly, if he doesn't respond correctly, that he's not going to be able to stay in power. Because I think that Putin, I think that Ukraine right now, they had to suspend the elections because of the war. That essentially a lot of states have it in their constitutions. If there's a war, they can put you under emergency powers where elections are suspended. And I believe that's the case with Zelensky right now. So people were speculating that Putin may further use this to justify that he's not a legitimate president. And so there may be some further aggression with that. So I feel like Zelensky, he's asking for help from NATO. He's asking for help from all these allies to try to, because I do feel like there is a sense there, just like we saw. Isn't that crazy? The same thing was in Biden's chart with Saturn going over K2. K2 is this destabilizing effect. It's in both Biden's and Zelensky's chart. There's this destabilizing K2. There's a sense of, and let me tell you, it's a sense of insecurity. So even though they may be going in front of the cameras with a poker face, saying, everything's cool. We're just going to go ahead and just send these weapons, and everything's going to be all worked out. I do sense that there's a worry there of, it is kind of like an, oh crap, are we making the right decision? And maybe we're just kind of going along with it. But let me pull up the chart one more time. I just want to make sure that I'm seeing things correctly here. One of the things I want to point out with Zelensky's chart is, I do feel like he's kind of in the wrong. This is weird, and I'm getting this. I feel like he's in the wrong profession. Um, and I know he was an actor before, but when I look at his chart, he's actually more of like a teacher or an actor, or I don't know if he's necessarily the best politician with this type of chart. So, sometimes we can actually take a career that's aligned with our chart, and then we can take careers that are not necessarily aligned with our chart. He may not be the best leader in this circumstance. Like, if they actually were wanting to actually have a different outcome, I don't know if he's the best. And I'm trying to be objective here. I'm trying to be objective when I look at the chart. I'll be honest. I mean, if I looked at Biden's chart, he actually does have Rahu in the 10th house. I mean, he does have more of a, love him or hate him, President Biden has more of a leadership type of chart than President Zelensky. Anyways,
Yeah.
I'm going to hand it off to you, Annabelle.
So, well, I think it's very curious that you're seeing a loss of leadership, because I'm seeing something very similar in the cards here, but it's because of this comfort and joy that we have going on over here. So when we get Four of Wands, Ace of Pentacles, and the Sun, this is a very, very happy home life, a very enriched home life, a new beginning of prosperity and peace. But next to it is the Five of Swords. So I know when we see Zelensky, and to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of his. I have not gotten great readings on him. I'm going to try and be as unbiased as possible. This is living in this luxurious safety while others are embattled, while others are doing your business. I see a new leader coming in out of this. So it's almost like there is like a turnover of the leadership, and someone else who is more competent and better positioned and better minded will step in and take over the leadership of this. Now, this would be someone who is much less reactive, much less dramatic, much less emotional about the events that are unfolding. This man would negotiate with Putin, would say, hey, enough is enough. Let's stop doing this. We're getting to a point where we're redlining in terms of our weaponry and our attack processes. Let's stop. As of now, Zelensky is still trying to amass something behind him, underneath him. And I feel like he is standing on a sand dune. And this is one of the images that I get as a psychic quite often when things are slipping away and people are failing at what they're trying to do. They cannot get purchase. And that sand dune just continues to slip out from under their feet. He is bleeding money. And I don't know where this money is going because I know we're sending him bucketfuls, but he is bleeding money, but he is still pulling it in. So I think we're going to get another ask for more money. I know he asks every few days. He's like a, 15-year-old who's asking for spending money. This process of dissatisfaction with his leadership is going very fast. At the same time, I think he will sense that this is being threatened. I don't want to say coming to an end, but being threatened. The veil is going to be ripped off. We're going to see what's behind the curtain. Oz will be shown. And he is really trying to secure his bag, not bag as the president of Ukraine, but Zelensky's bag. He's trying to secure that before this little turnover happens. And this turnover, this dissatisfaction with the way that he's leading things is happening now. We're not hearing about it, but it's happening right now. There are people that are getting in his face. There are people that are saying, we have to stop doing this. And they're individuals that are much more closely tied with the men and women that are out there on the front line and losing their lives. So, there are people that are in touch with the human losses and elements here that are getting in his face. This individual that's going to rise up and possibly supplant him is someone who has been working hand in hand with the young men and women that are out there. And I do feel he's a little bit older than Zelensky. He's more 55, 60, something like that. He's a bit older, much more seasoned, and a much more temperate kind of person. He understands the nuances of these two different but similar cultures of Ukraine and Russia. And he's going to come to the table. I would even hazard to say that he may have a father or a mother that's Ukrainian and a mother or a father that's Russian. And so he has this view that is a bit more balanced and unbiased. But I
Mhm.
do think we're going to see this, and it's happening now, but I don't think we're going to see it to come to fruition for about 8 months, 5 to 8 months. I think we're going to see some real serious action. The summer's going to be hot. The summer's going to move very quickly. And Zelensky is going to have his focus in securing his bag so that he can make sure he's okay after all is said and done.
Great reading. It very much aligned with what I was seeing. So I do feel like there's some sort of power slipping out of this whole situation with Zelensky, and your chart seems to your cards seem to confirm that. And yeah, I'm seeing it more towards 2025. Although we'll have to see how this year plays out. This year we have the USA election. Maybe they're waiting on that. But I
Aren't we
do
all?
I do feel like, and this could be a whole nother video about when we talk about escalations happening in the world. We're in a very slippery slope. I mean, these are the conditions. We have all these different tensions around the world, so that we have these conditions. It reminds me a lot of, if you study like history, World War II, and how you had all these different theaters of warfare that were opening up. We have the Middle East, we have Eastern Europe, and then last week we even had war game exercises by China surrounding Taiwan.
Mhm.
So we are in, we're seeing the chess pieces being moved around the board right now, and it's not looking good at the direction it's going. And so, if this, if a bigger conflict breaks out with all this, this could totally, we would maybe even have to do even a different reading, because this changed the whole game.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. And one of the things that I think we should do in the future, Thor, I think we should look at the charts of the fall of Rome and the United States and kind of do a compare and contrast. I think our viewers would love that. I think it would be very interesting. You know, the cycles of civilization fall and rise are very curious to me. I love Graham Hancock and his theory of the culture before history. You can watch his whole series on Netflix, Ancient Apocalypse. Very, very cool program. But I do believe that we had an advanced civilization that put up all of those pyramids, and there was something predating the Egyptian dynasties. I believe that there was another culture here that was advanced on this planet, and they were living merrily as they could. And then we had the Younger Dryas event. So, I don't think that it's unlikely that we're having a very similar effect. I hate to see us go into decline, but unfortunately, all things must end. So, are we the psychic news report of the decline of planet Earth? We may be. We may be part of that. But everybody can get their news right here, right?
Watch the psychic news report as we're in decline.
We'll be live during the decline. Don't worry.
Yeah, kind of a really morbid sense. But
Well,
yeah, we will
you know
be
what?
here for sure.
Don't think of it as morbid. We'll just be fiddling like they did, not like Nero did, but we'll be playing music like they did on the deck of the Titanic. It'll be lovely. We'll wear tiaras.
Well, someone's got to report it, and I guess that's going to be us. Let us know what you think down in the comments down below about this whole situation. Please be respectful to each other in the comments, but we'd love to hear your opinion.
Great. And as always, we do broadcast live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. New York time, 11 a.m. West Coast time, and 6 p.m. British Mean Time. So we'd love to see you guys there. Please like, share, and subscribe. Our channel is growing, and subscribe to Thor and I on our own channels. Thor Sandalwood, and I'm Fortune Cookies Tarot by Annabelle. We also do readings. Thor, where can people get a reading from you?
They can go to my website, thorsandalwood.com. Also, make sure you, like Annabelle said, follow my YouTube channel.
And you can find me at fortunecookiestarot.com. And I'm Fortune Cookies Tarot by Annabelle on YouTube. So I'm a little bit lighter over there. Thor, you're a little bit lighter on your channel too. But here we do the serious stuff, and we're going to direct you in the right way. So thank you, everybody, for watching, and we will see you in the future.